Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are on World Town Planning Day 2023. We're just going to give it a few seconds to just let everyone enter into the room, and then we will get started with our webinar for today. I'm delighted that we've got a range of speakers from a variety of global places, which is fantastic, and we very much will be looking to apply that learn globally and apply locally position today.
Okay.
I'm being made aware that we may be having a little bit of a sound issue so far. But I wonder if just before we do get completely started, if a few of the attendees could just let us know in the chat. So some people can hear us fine. So others that maybe aren't hearing us, you might want to refresh your browser and rejoin back in. But we know that there are quite a few people hearing us. So we will begin to move and get started this morning. And I'll go through a few technical issues with you all as well. So again, for everybody that has just joined, welcome, World Town Planning Day 2023. How on earth did we get here so fast in November? This year has flown past. I'm absolutely delighted to be joining you as convener of RTPI Scotland to share this webinar this morning. And I will be joined by speakers from Scotland, Malaysia and Nigeria. So what a fantastic lineup we have for you today. The webinar, as you know, which you signed up to, is about sustainability and resilience through planning, very much looking at building adaptability for future challenges. And as we do that, we're able to explore that at those different global and local scales today, and you'll hear that through our presenters. As I said, I am convener of RTPI Scotland, and I have to say at this point, a huge thanks to the RTPI Scotland International Group, who were instrumental in pulling together the speakers and the programme for today. So huge thanks to them and to the team at RTPI, who were diligently working in the background to also make this all work today. I come from a practice and education background, so I'm delighted that we have a mix of speakers across that today, and I'm certainly looking at how I can go back and apply that at the University of Dundee this week and in the weeks and months moving forward as well. So just so that you know, we're going to go through a series of presentations that you'll hear from our speakers, and we'll hold all the questions until the end. All the attendees have been muted by the organisers, but we hope that you really do enjoy what you have, you are going to hear, and that we invite you to use the chat box and the Q&A functions, which you'll see on your screen, to put questions in or add comments or thoughts or positions. And as we get past all the speakers, we will come together at a final Q&A session at the end, and we will use those to guide some of the conversation with our speakers. If you'd like to use closed captions, you're more than welcome to do. There is a CC closed captions button available to you on your screen. It'll be at the top of your screen, and you can choose the language in which you would like those to be shown in. The webinar today is recorded as well, and it will be sent out to you by email after the event. If you lose connection or you're having any issues with sound, if you could just refresh your browser and try rejoining again with the link that you have. If our speakers lose connectivity, then please wait in the webinar and we will be with you as soon as we can as we try and remedy any technical issues. So at this point, I'd love to introduce our first speaker. That is Fiona Simpson, who is Chief Planner at Scottish Government. And Fiona is going to set the Scottish national picture through the work of National Planning Framework 4. Fiona, over to you.
Good morning,
Kirsty, and as Kirsty said, good afternoon or evening, depending where you are in the world. It's a great pleasure to be here on World Town Planning Day to tell you a bit about the planning that we've been undertaking in Scotland and our approach to sustainable development. In particular, I'm going to tell you a bit of a story about National Planning Framework 4, and hopefully that will tell you more about what we're doing in our country, and I'm really looking forward to then hearing from the other speakers about their approach so we can compare and contrast. So in terms of the context for planning in Scotland, like all other countries throughout the world, we're working to localise the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And in Scotland, the main vehicle for doing this has been our National Performance Framework that you can see on the right-hand side of this slide. And this embeds the Sustainable Development Goals, and it sets out the kind of country that we want to be in the future, including our purpose and our values. And all 11 outcomes that are set out in our National Performance Framework are monitored, and progress against indicators are published online. So in terms of our current priorities, the Scottish Government has 3 overarching missions. Firstly, equality, particularly tackling poverty and protecting people from harm. Opportunity, so this is about building a greener and fairer economy. And community, in particular, delivering efficient and effective public services. So those outcomes and our wider goals underpin all of the work that we're doing on spatial planning in Scotland, and we believe that spatial planning has a really important role to play in delivering on our national ambitions. So this slide tells a bit of a story about some of the challenges that we're facing in Scotland. And at the top, you can see the gap in the healthy life expectancy tells quite a startling story about the impact that inequality has on the lives of real people living in real places throughout Scotland. And the map here also highlights areas where there's deep-rooted deprivation in Scotland. And this hasn't changed significantly since we first started monitoring Index of Multiple Deprivation back in 2004. So there's a clear and a very long-standing spatial concentration of disadvantage in Scotland, particularly in the west of the central belt of Scotland, where we have a very dense level of population. And this is also reflected in how people feel about where they live, their neighbourhoods. So the figures on the right-hand side show that in the least deprived areas of Scotland, there's generally high levels of satisfaction with their area, compared to the most deprived areas where there's much lower levels of satisfaction. So that tells the story of there being a very important role for planning in Scotland to help reshape our places and overcome such contrasts in people's life experiences. So as well as having those challenges that come from the past and are very much in the present, we've got very significant challenges in the future with regards to sustainable development. And in terms of climate change, we know that our climate is already changing and we need to adapt to the impacts that we're experiencing already. There's an increased risk of flooding, extreme weather events and changing temperatures expecting to have really quite significant impacts. And this will mean that we have to build much more resilience into our infrastructure, our economy, our communities and our places. And alongside that adaptation to climate change, we've got a firm commitment to achieving net zero by 2045. And this will really mean that we have to build significant amounts of new infrastructure, particularly for our energy sector. Transport is also our biggest contributor to climate change, so we're on a mission to rethink how we use our cars and to reduce our daily journeys by car. And land use also requires careful planning. We've got very stretching targets for increasing woodland and forestry cover and to restore our peatland. So with our past issues and our current issues and our future issues, there's never been a better time to have a really clear plan for change in Scotland. So this slide just tells a quick story really of a long history of planning at the spatial scale, at the national scale in Scotland. We had our first national planning framework in 2004, and it continues to really form the foundations of the strategy that we see today. This was followed by the second National Planning Framework, NPF2, in 2009, and that was the first time it had statutory status, and it set out a series of national developments. Those developments were very much of their time. They included airport developments, shipping, power stations, and projects that were really seen as supporting our country's economic growth. And the third version was published in 2014. That was National Planning Framework 3, and that built on the second National Planning Framework and broadened our approach and included new priorities like significant electricity grid expansion, active travel, and digital networks. So the fourth version of our National Planning Framework aims to respond to the context that I set out earlier and the priorities of achieving equality, but also achieving a just transition to net zero. And that climate ambition has been very much at the heart of the new version of our National Spatial Strategy. And it's really quite a significant shift, and it really focuses all of our approach to planning on the climate and nature crises. And throughout the consultation process for this, we were really strongly encouraged to be really bold about this, to not compromise as much as we may have done in the past. And that came from our stakeholders, as well as members of the public and the Scottish Parliament. So we're really clear in National Planning Framework 4 that the change will be significant and it needs to happen at pace. And this will only be achieved if everything we do, whether that's the plans that we're preparing or the decisions we're making on individual applications, that has to be viewed through the lens of sustainable development. So National Planning Framework 4 isn't just the Scottish Government's plan. It was prepared through extensive engagement and consultation and collaboration, a real group effort to prepare a shared plan for Scotland as a whole. Importantly, for the first time, the Scottish Parliament had to approve it before it could be adopted by the Scottish ministers. And it provides a very long-term spatial strategy that everyone has signed up to. It sets out a geographic view of the question of where development needs to happen in a long-term spatial strategy. And this is backed up by a suite of national planning policies that set out the type of development we do and don't want to see. And it's also supported by a delivery programme that we're working on now. And that sets out a range of actions that we're taking to make the strategy come forward in practice. Crucially, it's part of the statutory development plan. So it's not just a pretty strategy that sits on the shelf. It really does form the foundations of a plan-led system in Scotland. So this slide very simply summarises the strategy as a whole in the National Planning Framework. And in very broad terms, what we're trying to do is to create sustainable places where we protect our assets and respond to environmental challenges, livable places where people come first and we support quality of life, and productive places where there's real confidence to invest in a wellbeing economy. And under each of those three key outcomes, there's a range of spatial principles that guide what we're trying to achieve. So a just transition, where our journey to net zero is fair for everyone and that no one is left behind, and that we make best use by conserving and recycling our assets. Under livable places, there's a focus on local living, so building homes closer to the facilities that people need to use on a daily basis, as well as compact urban growth to minimise the additional land take from new development. And under productive places, we want to manage development in a balanced way, so we encourage it where it's most needed and manage development sustainably in areas of pressure, as well as achieving rural revitalisation to reverse past patterns of decline in rural Scotland. So that in a nutshell is the overarching strategy for the National Planning Framework, but those principles all play out differently across our country. So our strategy for Scotland as a whole is broadly structured around 5 quite broad regions. There's the north and west of Scotland, so the coastal areas, which are relatively rural with island communities, and we want to grow the blue economy to help increase the population of this area and build a stronger economy there. There's the north, focusing on the Highlands, as well as the south of Scotland, where we're looking to grow a sustainable rural development and to grow a green economy in these areas to again help sustain the rural population in the future. In the northeast of Scotland, there's traditionally been quite strong reliance on the oil and gas sector. So we're looking at a strategy that's helping us to move towards net zero by using the skills and experience in that area. And in the central urban area, in the central belt, where actually the majority of our population live, we're looking at planning our places for low carbon urban living and to stimulate economic investment. So this very broad strategy is also supported by a series of national developments, and these are priority projects that our plan wants to take forward. And they reflect the core priorities of the strategy, and they'll help us to mitigate climate change and adapt to it. So it includes large-scale energy and waste sector infrastructure, major public transport projects for some of our cities, green and blue infrastructure, which will play a really important role in adapting our places to the impacts of climate change, ports and harbours around our coasts, which will support on and offshore renewable energy development, regenerating our previously high carbon industrial sites, quite large scale sites, to help them move towards contributing to a greener economy through new technologies, and waterfront regeneration, particularly in some of our cities, to help those important areas become more resilient to the future impacts of climate change whilst achieving social and economic benefits. So the final part of the National Planning Framework is a comprehensive suite of national planning policies. And this was the first time that at a Scottish level, we set out a single suite of national planning policies. And that was really quite a big challenge and required a lot of collaborative work with our planning authorities and other stakeholders with expertise in a whole wide range of areas to get the policy wording just right. So these policies work together, and they work together with policies that are set out in local development plans. And those two things should work together. But over time, we expect that having a single set of planning policies will make the system in Scotland easier to follow and more predictable, as the policies can be applied consistently to every decision. And ideally, we wouldn't want to see them repeated or reinvented in every local development plan unless there's a strong case for that locally. So that should help to streamline the process and make it more consistent and predictable. And these policies follow the same three outcomes of sustainable, livable and productive places. And policy 1 that's highlighted here is really important because it gives significant weight to the climate and nature crises. So it's cross-cutting and it applies to all decisions, and it aims to tip the balance and be very clear that the climate and nature crises are drivers for sustainable development. But all of the policies need to be taken together, and we can't just depend on a single policy in decision making. So the other policies cover specific topics, and they either aim to protect or enhance assets, or to give a steer on the location of development, or enable different types of development. But they have all been developed as well with the climate and nature crises in mind. So I'm just going to give you some examples. You won't be able to see the detail here, but here are some extracts from some of the policies. So policy 11 is our policy on energy, and we've rewritten this policy quite significantly, and it's now extremely clear that all proposals for renewable energy will be supported in principle. There are still criteria set out that need to be met, and obviously policies have to be read and applied as together, but there's a strong steer from this policy of support. Some of our other policies also aim to minimise carbon and make best use of the assets that we have. So here in policy 9, we set out a new policy on empty buildings to encourage the reuse of the existing built environment as much as possible and discourage demolition. Some of our policies are more about adapting to the future impacts of climate change. So policy 19 aims to encourage connections to sustainable sources of heat. But this policy here that's highlighted aims to design in more sustainable temperature management in the future to again help our building stock adapt to the impacts of climate change. And other policies give a steer on the location of development. So the question of where can have a very significant impact on the overall sustainability of decision making. So the example here in policy 28 on retail actively discourages retail development in out of centre locations and deliberately directs it to existing city, town and neighbourhood centres to support our broader principles of local living and to recognise the importance of stimulating development that is less reliant on the use of the car. So that might all sound quite straightforward as planners. I'm sure around the world we know these are the good things that we need to do, and I would say our national planning framework has been recognised and widely welcomed in Scotland as an important step forward. But as you'll see from some of the headlines here, there's a mix of views on the approach that we've taken, and it's really required the Scottish ministers, the Scottish Parliament and the planning profession in Scotland to be quite brave and to be quite bold and to make some quite difficult choices. And it's clear that not everyone will agree with those choices, and that in some parts of society there's different views on how far we should go and how fast we should go. And I'm sure those different views will continue to play out as we move towards a more sustainable model of development through MPF4. But as planners, it's really important that we recognise it's our job to make sure that decisions that we make are in the long-term public interest rather than for short-term or for individual gain. And the sustainability agenda and the scale of the challenge with climate and nature emergencies means that we need to be ever more clear about that purpose. And in Scotland, we're quite lucky that purpose is actually embedded in our planning legislation. So the purpose of planning is to manage the development and use of land in the long-term public interest is our mantra, and that has formed the basis of our national spatial strategy, as well as being a really important guide for local development plans that will come forward next. So just to conclude, I think that none of this is very easy. Sustainable development is a big challenge, and we're facing some really significant challenges. The global climate and nature crises are really real, and they're already happening, and they're having a significant impact. But in Scotland, we recognise these challenges are also bringing opportunities to address some of the inequalities we've seen in the past in society, to grow a greener economy, and to achieve benefits that are in line with our national outcomes. But that will only happen if we take the right approach to development planning. So planning has a really important role to play because it has a long-term and a spatial perspective. And I think many of you will agree there's never been a more important time for that perspective. And in Scotland, having a clear and ambitious plan like MPF4 can really help, but that plan is just the first step towards sustainable development, and its delivery will depend on significant change happening in quite a short space of time now. So to do that, we need to be bold, we need to work together, and we need to focus on delivering change that's in the long-term public interest in line with the purpose of the planning system. So thank you very much, and I'll pass back to Kirsty.
Thanks very much for that, Fiona. What a fantastic start to our morning, and already beginning to see questions coming in, but we will save them all towards the end. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce our second speaker. So Noraida Saludin is president of the Malaysian Institute of Planners, and is going to offer a Malaysian perspective, looking at the role of spatial planning in strengthening urban resilience, with that example exactly from Malaysia. So welcome to you, Noraida. It's great to see you, and over to you.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me at this webinar. Yes, obviously, I'm very excited to be talking. I was a bit nervous about the technical issues just now. So I will be bringing us through quickly in quite a jiff on what we are doing in Malaysia in the context of the overall planning in the country, in addressing the challenges that we face today. So the Malaysian planning system, we have pretty much inherited that from the British system, where we have now the 3 tiers of planning, where at the national level we have what we call the National Physical Planning Plan that covers the whole of the Peninsular Malaysia, and then through the Town and Country Planning Act, we have the state level plan, which covers the state of Malaysia. In Malaysia, we have 14 states, but the Town and Country Planning Act only covers the peninsular part of Malaysia. It doesn't cover the Borneo part of Malaysia. And then after that, we have the local and district level planning. In between the national and the state, we have what we call regional level planning that covers a larger area than the state, maybe involve 2 states or 3 states. And this is where a slightly larger territorial kind of planning are being done in the country. And a little bit on the demographic profile of Malaysia. We are today about 33.4 million population, and out of that, 91% are the citizen, and roughly about 9% are non-citizen. And the number of households today is 7.9 million households. And the size of household has actually reduced compared to maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, where back then we were 5 persons per household. It went down to 4.5, and now as of the latest census, is about 3.8 persons per household. And in terms of the breakdown of the population, 22% of our population are children below the age of 14, and then quite a big number of youth population, which is 8.7 million or 26%. And the working population between the year of the age of 15 to 64 years old, we have about 70%. And but what is interesting is the population that is 65 years and above are increasing, and now it's already 7.4%. And it has been projected that Malaysia too, like many other countries, will be going into aging society. So that's one of big, huge challenge that we face in terms of future development in the country. Other than that, in the context of planning for sustainability and resilience in Malaysia, some of the bigger challenge that we face now is on the promoting or the implementation and development that is addressing the climate change and reducing carbon emission. So low carbon development in urban planning is quite current focus as we are now faced with urbanization, high rate of urbanization. And in Malaysia, today's urbanization is close to 80%, and we are expected to even be more urbanized in the next 5 years and 10 years to go. And in terms of the other challenge that we face is in the aspect of sustainable transportation, where we as a nation still rely heavily on private vehicle. And in the bigger cities, we still still a huge amount of single occupancy vehicles using our road. The government have implemented a network of public transport, but it has not been quite covering a large area. The focus is still in the bigger city, especially the capital city of Kuala Lumpur. But in terms of providing light rapid transit, the mass rapid transit, but still there are areas that are not accessible to that kind of public transport. Yes, we still have buses, but they are not as efficient as the service of the light rails or the rapid rails. So that's a challenge because especially now in the situation where financial resources are quite limited. And we are also experiencing the increased urbanization rate and pressure for the urban area to provide for increased requirement for facilities due to people coming in, working in the cities and in the city, and the rural area are being left. What you see now in many rural areas in Malaysia, the older generations in the agriculture sector, the youngs are migrating to the city, and so the challenge for us is how do you plan about where we provide jobs in the rural area so that people don't have to live in a big city and also commute in the big city. That's one of the big challenges that we face. And in terms of, there's also challenges on economic development, balancing development and the need for development and the need for conservation. Malaysia as a country have quite a sizable amount of forest reserve land where it's natural forest, but the size over years has reduced due to the opening up of more and more urban areas. So the challenge now is to keep the remaining natural forest as not just for green area, but also as carbon stock resources, and to ensure that development within the urban areas are really efficient and being optimized within the confine of the urban areas or the designated development areas. So with that, those are the big challenges or the major challenges that we face in the country. We also face challenges such as the impact of climate change, and that now is even more being seen as we are faced with very erratic weather condition where flooding happens, heavy rains that are happening in the urban areas. One of the important planning document in the country is National Physical Plan. And the National Physical Plan, up until today, we have it for up to 4 series or 4 versions, I would say. The first one, we had it in 2005, and the National Physical Plan are being reviewed every 5 years. So the current one, which is the NPP4, or in the diagram here is written RFN4. These are the 4th version of the National Physical Plan that were reviewed to suit the new requirement and demand that to face the current challenges that we are facing. And within the National Physical Plan 4, the vision that is put forth by the government is for the nation to be prosperous, to be resilient, and to be livable. And with these strategies are being put for to cover all 3 visions quite significantly. And what you're seeing on the map is, on the plan is the spatial strategy, where it's a compilation or where resource areas of conservation has been identified, areas for focused economic development and urban development has been identified as well. So these are the plan that is in our National Physical Plan. And I would like to also mention that in the last National Physical Plan, a stronger strategy has been put in terms of addressing climate change. This is with regards to how do we deal with flooding, sea level rise, because in the country, majority of our urban center atau big cities are located along the coast. So some of these cities face the threat of sea level rise and also monsoon flooding. So due to that, the one of the tools that was developed after resultant of the National Physical Plan was we came up with the National Coastal Zone Physical Plan. This National Coastal Zone Physical Plan, the focus was really on the area along the coastal zone, which is about 3 nautical mile towards the sea, and then 15 or 20 nautical mile inland. So really covering providing the strategic direction for development along the coastal zone of Peninsular Malaysia. And one of the tools that came out from this National Coastal Physical Plan is what we call a Coastal Vulnerability Index, CVI. And the CVI measures the vulnerability and the threat and exposure that are faced by all the areas along the coastal zone. And we look at in terms of the risk to erosion, sea level rise, natural disasters. It is now a tool that Malaysia have to evaluate, and then would be a decision-making tool to help prioritize areas along the coast where we assess their vulnerability to various coastal hazards. And the National Coastal Physical Plan, of course, aim to optimize the coastal resources management in order to achieve sustainable development, and also in order particularly to address the impact of climate change. And within the plan, all the area along the coastline, there is already an indicator of whether what will be their level of risk. So that would help decision makers when they plan out, for example, major infrastructure, whether you are in the red zone or in the green zone or in the orange zone or yellow zone. So this obviously will become quite useful to planners as well as city managers as well as infrastructure providers. Because a lot of our major national infrastructure are located along the coastal zone. So this is one of the major things that came out from the National Coastal Physical Plan. The other one, the other important document and policy that came out from the National Physical Plan is what is for the protection of the central forest spine of Peninsular Malaysia. So this plan provide a policy document and intervention on how we protect the tropical rainforest of Malaysia, which if you see in the plan, the green color area, those are the major forest complex. And some of these forest complex, they were fragmented. Fragmented because of encroachment from agriculture development or from opening up new area for urban development. And such fragmentation have in a way impact the biodiversity and the flora and fauna. So the Central Forest Spine Master Plan, or CFS we call it, aim to provide measures where we try to link back all those fragmented forests. And this high level strategic direction to be translated into implementation in a bit more refined and detailed with according to the location or locality through either the state plan, state structure plan, or the local plan for each of the district in the country. And also in addressing the challenge that we face with regards to climate change and impact of urban development, we also have come out with the National Low Carbon Cities Master Plan, which provides framework that became a guiding framework for how do we do urban development, but at the same time reduce carbon emission in order to meet our commitment for carbon emission reduction. So this is one of the other supporting national level document that we have in the country in support of the National Physical Plan. And the National Low Carbon City Master Plan is quite detailed in terms of it identified priority action that we have to do in Malaysia and cities in Malaysia have to undertake to deliver the commitment for carbon reduction. So with that, all this different level of focus plan, they are in support of the National Physical Plan, but they give a bit more in-depth direction in terms of their specific focus in delivering the overall arching policies of the country for progressive, resilient, and livable development in Malaysia. With that, I think that's the end of my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Noraida. It was fascinating to see some of that insight into how Malaysia are dealing with some of those challenges, and I think we're beginning to see, some similarities and some very, different elements between the presentations so far. So thank you so much. We're going to now move on to our third and final speaker, who is Bisi Olamide, and Bisi is a member of the Nigerian Institute of Architects, and also is teaches at the University of Lagos. Bisi is going to give an African perspective at a neighbourhood scale, looking at resilience by default, the case of Festac Town in Lagos, Nigeria. So we'll get Noraida just to switch her camera off there, and we'll get Bisi to join us now. Fantastic, thank you. We're just going to give it a little second while we just sort out the tech for Bisi to be able to join us.
I think Bisi might be having some technical issues. In the meantime, we might be best to move on to a couple of questions. Yes, thank you.
We can. Let's do that just now, because we definitely have a lot of questions to get through. We have Fiona, and if I could invite Noraida to put her camera back on too, if possible, and we'll go through a couple of the questions in the Q&A just now. So there are a lot, and I'll work my way through them, folks, if you don't mind. The first one that has come in is what are we doing in terms of community well-being in focus? So we're talking obviously very rightly about sustainability and resilience, but there are a couple of questions leading towards what are those plans doing? What is the Malaysian plan? What's National Planning Framework doing in terms of supporting community well-being? Fiona, I don't know if you want to maybe start.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that our strategy, really covers the 3 pillars of sustainable development, and, as well as sustainable places and productive places. It's about livable places and about people and communities. And ultimately, that's why we're doing this. So, we see the move towards addressing net zero and building resilience as being an integral part of the well-being of people. So we're looking to grow a greener, fairer economy, so a well-being economy with community wealth building at its heart, but also to create more livable places, so places that people can get around more easily. They don't have to have access to a car to be able to use. So we hope that by pushing harder on sustainability, we'll actually be able to overcome some of the disadvantages that some people have had, whether that's a poorer environment at present, or pollution, or a lack of being able to get around as easily as other people that do have a car at the moment. So an integral part, I would say, of the strategy as a whole.
Great, thanks, Fiona. Noraida, what about you? How much of an influence is well-being of people in your plans and policies?
Yeah, you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. If you remember National Physical Plan 1, 2, 3, and 4, when we did the first one, the focus was really spatial and physical. And then the second one went into the aspects of economic development. But now as we go into the fourth one, it's there's a bit more on the social aspect of the development and impact of development. And in fact, today today as we are doing our National Planning Congress, the conversation that's happening today is how do we now do the plan bottom up instead of top down, because a lot of our plans are done by the government, and we are now looking into putting in a system and a different type of plan where it's bottom up, and getting a lot more the plan are being prepared by the people according to what their focus. Of course, public participation has been there in all our plan making, but it's not to a level where it is real public participation that the proposal comes from the people. But in the past, it's just getting input. What do you want? What do you need? That kinds of engagement. So today, we've come to a point where the society also demand more involvement in plan.
Oh, I think we might have just lost Noraida there for a second. What we will do is at this point, because I see Bissy's managed to join us now again, we'll move on to Bissy's presentation, if that's okay. So hi, Bissy. Thanks again for joining us this morning. What we'll do is we'll just let you get on with your presentation, because I'm delighted and I can't wait to hear a bit more about the work in Lagos. Over to you.
Thank you, Kirsty. I'm very glad to be here. This is some work that Tony Wicker and myself have done, but I'm going to be presenting, but he will also join in the Q&A. So we are both architects, and we have looked at the issue of resilience and planning from an architect's perspective, looking at it in terms of environment behavior research and studying how people actually affected and affect the planned cities and planned environments which we are in. And so we are looking at the case study of Festac Town in Lagos. So Festac Town is a development located in Lagos, and it was actually created for an event which was a cultural extravaganza in 1977. Lagos is a city and is also a state. And at the time when Festac Town was created, Lagos was the capital of Nigeria and also the commercial capital of Nigeria, which it still is till today. It's now located in the administrative area called the Amu or Dauphin local government area. And the name Festac actually comes from is an acronym that comes from the name of the festival, which was the Festival of Arts and Culture, which is an African culture festival in 1977. So Festac comes from that acronym, from the festival. And it was a month-long festival, and the estate was developed in time to accommodate the various contingents from the different countries that came for the festival. There were about 45,000 participants, and they came and they were housed in this estate, which had everything for decent living. There were recreation areas, service and transportation hubs, and commercial facilities that were put in place for that event. So it was owned by the federal government of Nigeria, and Festac Town was developed by a consortium of Eastern Bloc consultants and contractors. The objective actually was to create an area with an improved quality of life for the eventual residents through providing adequate housing. Now, after the month-long event. The housing was allocated to people who won apartments based on a very transparent allocation process through an open ballot. Now, it was actually one of the earliest means-tested allocations, because people who tried to get who applied for these apartments had to show proof of income, and repayments for the mortgages were based on the income, and the property that was allocated was also based on the income level of the prospective allotee, to make sure that repayments could be made. Repayments were made over a period of between 10 and 12 years. And one original beneficiary said that he paid the princely sum at the time of 26 naira 50 kobo a month for 12 years. Now, we need to bear in mind that the naira at that point in time was stronger than the US dollar. So 26 naira 50 kobo per month was about $40 a month, which was quite a lot of money. And this particular person spent 26 naira 50 kobo and owned a 2-bedroom flat. So that was quite a benefit. Now, at inception, Fesak Town was a suburban location. The major landmark for Fesak Town was the transportation route to Badagry. Badagry was infamous as a slave port back in colonial days, but also was the route to the border town of Seme, which is a town on the border of Nigeria and what was at the time called the country called the Dahomey, which is now called the Republic of Benin. And a lot of goods and people came from the West Coast to trade with Nigeria, Nigeria being a very large populace and economically viable place to conduct business. So, and there were also along that same Badagry Expressway route, there were a lot of manufacturing industries and assembly plants. Volkswagen.
I think we just might have a little bit of a connection issue there with Bissy just now. We'll just give it a second to see if Bissy can rejoin us, as we were right in the middle of getting to know what was going on in Fesak Town and the work in relation to supporting housing for the communities there. While we're sorting that out, I think we'll jump back again to the Q&A, because I am conscious there are a lot of questions. So if I could invite Fiona and Noraida to pop back on the screen again, that would be fantastic. And we'll just go through a few more of the questions. As always, we expect things to come up around resources, Fiona. And you're here, so we'll start with you. And Noraida's just joining us there. How well resourced in terms of planning professionals at national, regional and local levels are each of the respective countries? Oh, we have Bissy back again. Can you hear us, Bissy? Okay. Can you hear us, Bissy?
Yes, I can. The screen just went blank at some point.
No problem. What we'll do is we'll hold that question. Apologies to the audience. We'll get back right into Bissy's presentation, because we want to make sure that we can get right through to the end of that. So we'll go back to Bissy's presentation and then we'll come back to questions again. Thank you. On you go, Bissy.
Right, thank you. So the top left image shows a block of flats, single bedroom flats, low rise. And you can see on the exterior that residents have appropriated public space and created informal commercial enterprises in that particular location, which shows that must have definitely been lacking in that area. And that was also a result of population explosion. That type of development did not exist in the Festac town that was created in 1977. The image on the right shows a block of flats with 2-bedroom apartments. And you can see on the ground floor that the residents have made a transformation and created a security presence in the form of burglar bars, which is evidence of the fact that there's increased insecurity at the time, and that is their own way of creating some security for themselves. The picture at the bottom is one of semi-detached house of 3-bedroom houses, three bedrooms, and you can see that the residents have tried to personalize the building, changing the windows and closing up a balcony to create a more private space. Now, Festac Town has avenues which form the boundary and which also form internal roads to create a grid-like system. Now, the avenues are numbered from 1 to 7, and you can see that avenues 1, 4, 7, and 2 form the boundaries, and 3, 5, and 6 are internal roads. The grid pattern which was created forms areas which are secluded, which also have their own community focus. And there's also a link from the later developed Amur Dofin estate into Festac Town, which created more traffic into the area and increased commercial activity. So in terms of the planning of the estate, you can see Festac Town is quite well planned. There was, in terms of the geographical consideration, because Lagos State is actually quite a very low-lying state, and in some areas, Lagos is actually below sea level. But to ameliorate that and prevent a situation of flooding, which happens perennially in many areas of Lagos, a man-made canal was constructed, and that canal enables stormwater drainage and runoff. Now, in terms of the units themselves, the planning of the residential areas was based on the Rayburn concept, which allows green areas and cul-de-sacs such that pedestrians can walk from one area to another without having to cross roads. And therefore, there was a lot of community involvement and development along the lifespan of Festac Town as it originally was intended to be. There was also very generous traffic circulation. The roads are very wide, and they're wide grass verges that separate the major avenues, which are dual carriageways, from the pedestrian walkway, the pavement. And so the tree-lined avenues also create a lot of ambience and make it a nice place for people to walk around in Festac Town. Now, infrastructure was provided to make sure that it was convenient. And at the inception of Festac Town, there were street lights, there was good drainage. You can see the water tank tower, and there was a mini waterworks, and everything worked very well. It was a nice place to be at all times of the day and night. And because it was well lit up, there was a lot of security, and people did not feel any reason to be afraid also. However, there came a point in time when things changed from how it was planned to be to what it is today. And that began when Lagos was changed from the capital of Nigeria to Abuja. Abuja is the geographical center of Nigeria. And when that happened, the relocation of government agencies was made mandatory, and the governing or the controlling authority of Festac Town, which is Federal Housing Authority, also relocated to Abuja. Now, the first phase of the estate, which had 3 residential communities, eventually had an intended population of 55,000, but it went beyond that. And when the relocation to Abuja happened, the monitoring and control by the Federal Housing Authority was significantly reduced in terms of quality and perseverance. So what happened then was that the original layout and planning was changed over time because of the influence and activities of people. Because the Federal Housing Authority also left, there was people power, and they actually took charge and made some transformations of their own. So you can see that in some areas, such as the second gate, which is the area that you can see in the image, a market sprung up, which was larger than originally intended to. There are also numerous places of worship, which obviously followed from the fact that there was a population in explosion, kind of. Then also there were places such as the image to the right, which shows the power supply company that had the setback encroached upon by people who intended to use it for commercial activities. And this was a commonplace experience in Festac Town at the time. You can also see other aspects of resilience, which are space appropriation for informal commercial activities, and additions to semi-detached units, and also to low-income units, where you can see also additional commercial activity. And the commercial activity is as a result of the fact that in the later years of Festac Town, after the relocation of Lagos State, of the capital from Lagos to Abuja, other developments around Festac Town made it a more viable place for commerce and for residences. And some of these are the Trade Fair Complex, which is located along that same Badagry Expressway I mentioned earlier on, and also the closeness to Apapa Port, which made it a very good area for people who worked in Apapa Port to live. And in addition, there's the major rice market. Rice is one of the major staple foods in Nigeria, and there's a major rice market close to Amuwo-Odofin. Amuwo-Odofin also has a lot of commercial and industrial developments and warehouses. And so there's an influx of heavy goods vehicles that came into Festac Town and began to create another commercial sector. And this commercial sector, of course, engendered more commerce, more residents. And in addition to these aspects was also the aspect of the fact that there was less order in terms of developments, and some of the areas which were originally meant to be green spaces were sold out, given out, or appropriated by developers and built on indiscriminately. So more transformations came into place, and there are commercial hubs or nodes that spring up all around. For example, the 512 Road Junction around the 5th Avenue, which shows the sidewalks, and also part of the medians have been employed by residents and used as commercial hubs. Commerce is the main thing around Festac Town, and it has created a difference in terms of the security. The socio-cultural environment has changed. There are nightclubs. There are places that open at night that never existed. It is not as pleasant an area as before, but it is still a place where a lot of people aspire to live in. So these are some other aspects of resilience which we can see around Festac Town. Banks have multiple branches, places of worship have multiple centers as well. There are numerous schools, primary and secondary schools, and in some cases, these schools are in buildings which are not necessarily ideal or fit for purpose, but they exist anyway. Hospitals and health centers, most of them privately owned, also exist, and there are different types of markets, informal and supermarkets as well, which serve the growing population of Festac Town. You can see in this slide some images of Catholic churches. There are 5 Catholic churches within Festac Town, and these are just an image of 3. So people are very religious in Nigeria, and this is a manifestation of that within Festac Town. Now, part of 6th Avenue, which is the new extension, is land which has been given to private developers, and most of the accommodation built in such areas are for the high income. So these are townhouses, they are semi-detached or detached houses, and generally the planning approval or the building process has not been as stringent as for the original parts of Festac Town that were developed in the 70s. The result of that is that there have been a lot of changes, and the order has been changed. There's been a population increase, increase in security, and definitely the master plan has been bastardized. It has been changed so much it is not the same. Now, how has this affected the planning and the life in Festac Town? What it has done, it has changed the demographic and changed the way the estate was managed. Now, in Nigeria, it's a common system to have estates where the residents themselves conduct themselves in a way in which they police and manage the estate, in addition to the statutory authority, be it government or local government, federal or state, that created the estate, such that the communities within the estate, starting from an apartment block or a neighborhood and coming to a close or a larger designated area, also form a side-by-side management committee, in addition to what the government has provided. And these residents would also take care and be in touch and in charge of maintaining the roads and making sure that people behave in appropriate social ways, such that the environment within which they live functions properly. But with the influx of developers, with the change of the master plan, with the relocation of the management company to Abuja, many of the old residents eventually left, and this system of maintaining some form of control and management system left and ended. And so things have changed in Festac Town, and there's much more haphazard life there now. However, it's not necessarily all negative. There is increased population, increased commerce, new buildings, and like I said, it's still a place where people want to live. So it's important for planning purposes to remember that we cannot always necessarily plan for what we are not able to forecast, but we need to plan and ensure that management is also able to continue. Management is also able to give support at the time. The last challenge that has bedeviled Festac Town is the fact that the Lagos State government and the Federal Housing Authority and the local governments are in some form of dispute as to who is in charge of the estate in terms of revenue to be collected, and that has adversely affected the fortunes of Festac Town and therefore the amount that is spent on regenerating it. We appreciate the resilience of the residents, and that's what we're trying to highlight, even though it was not necessarily planned for Festac Town. It's a lesson for other areas that are planned to always take residents into consideration. Thank you.
That was absolutely perfect timing there, Bessie. Thank you so much for that. definitely looks like a resilient community in some respects coming through there in Festac Town, but recognising some really big challenges that are not within the control of the community or necessarily the planners as well, when being the state city of Nigeria and then it moving to a different city and things, how that has impacted on the communities and obviously the development and economy as well. So lots of challenges there too. I am conscious for everyone that it is already 9:45 and we were due to finish at 9:45, but I do just want, if everybody's able to just hang on for a few minutes there, just very quickly to bring our presenters all back on the screen again. They've been really busy working in the background, answering quite a lot of the questions in the Q&A because we've ran out of time. But there's definitely a few there that were coming up around resilience and coastal resilience, I think, Fiona, and perhaps for Noraida as well, to the impact that's having. How are we planning for that coastal resilience?
Yeah, I've answered the question from a Scottish perspective, but I think it's an important point, isn't it? For me, some of the questions are picking up on the transition and everyone being part of the transition, and also on adaptation as well as mitigating climate change. So there are some core themes, I think, that have come from the questions that we've seen today.
Absolutely, that's definitely come through. And I think, Bissy, from your side, that element of how the community can be part of development and change as well. And you were talking about how they were making use of the spaces outside their homes, the benefits to some of the approaches to the design and layout as well, and almost some of the entrepreneurship that was coming through from them as well. Clearly a resilient community was what came through for me. Is that the sense from yourself, that the people themselves are really resilient? Oh, I think we've lost your sound. No, we've lost your sound, I'm afraid, Bissy. Which is really unfortunate because I want to know the answer to this question. So I'm going to have to follow up with Bissy on that one. What we'll do is the speakers can have another look at the Q&A, and we can make sure we bring up any other questions and try and answer them as best as we can. Unfortunately, Bissy's not been able to join us. I know Noraida is still answering questions in the Q&A for us as well. But certainly overall, from all the presentations that I've listened to this morning, the themes around livable places that came through in Bissy's. How do you make Festac Town livable? How is it creating a livable place? Came across really, really strongly. The fact that we're looking at that livability, it's specifically mentioned in Scotland. There are slightly different wording used for the likes of Malaysia. But again, Malaysia talking about being prosperous, resilient and livable as a country too. And I think we recognise at all those levels that we're working at that there are challenges both at the local level and at the national one in terms of how we implement change, how we encourage others to participate in this. And as planners, having such a significant role in fostering change and dealing with ultimately these wicked issues that will not go away easily, our role to try and nurture others to be part of this, be part of a wider community of change, and to just grab those words that you used, Fiona, to be bold, I think. And we're seeing that come through in all the countries. We recognise those challenges. And they're not to be fixed overnight. So that longer term vision for change is really, really important. Can I thank all the speakers again? Can I thank the audience as well? I apologise that we had some technical issues today. But we do hope that it has given you some food for thought. Please do reach out to our speakers. You will get the recording as well. I'm sure our speakers would love to hear from you as well and have further conversations as well. I wish you well on World Town Planning Day 2023. Let's keep our global community engaged, bold, challenged and creative all in one go. Thank you very much for everyone, and have a fantastic day or evening wherever you are.